The man didn't even look back. With a heart as cold as a winter wind, he tossed a small cardboard box out his car and drove off. Tires screeching, dust rising. Inside that box, 2 tiny puppies whimpered, confused and trembling. The highway roared with speeding cars. No shelter, no food, no hope. Their cries were swallowed by the sound of engines and indifference. The world passed by, too fast to notice or care, but far beyond the concrete and cruelty, a force of compassion stirred. Someone or something was about to change their fate forever, and the man who left them behind would soon learn that kindness always finds a way. It was supposed to be a joyous day when the man brought the puppies home. His children squealed with excitement, naming the tiny furballs Sunny and Shadow. For a brief while, the house was filled with laughter and the soft patting of paws across the tile floor. But joy has a short shelf life in hearts hardened by impatience. Within days, the man's mood began to sour. The puppies cried at night, lonely and in need of their mother. They chewed shoes, had accents on the floor, and required more care than he was willing to give. His patience thinned, his temper flared. The children soon grew tired of the responsibility, too, distracted by screens and schoolwork. One morning, without warning, he shoved both puppies into a cardboard box. No food, no blanket, not even a note. They whimpered softly, still believing they were going somewhere special. A park, maybe, or a new home. The man started his car and drove without a word, the box shifting slightly in the back seat with every bump. The road stretched endlessly as he left the city behind. Eventually, he reached a quiet stretch of highway flanked by overgrown grass and a rusted old guardrail. It was the kind of place no one ever stopped, too far from town, too close to nowhere. He pulled over near mile marker 47. There was no hesitation, no second thought. With one swift motion, he opened the passenger door, lifted the box, and tossed it into the grass like yesterday's garbage. The puppies let out a confused cry as the door slammed shut. The engine roared to life, tires screeching against gravel as the car disappeared into the distance. The box tipped slightly on landing, but didn't break. Inside, Sunny and Shadow blinked at the sudden brightness. The sun glared overhead, and the wind carried the noise of passing cars, cold, fast, uncaring. They didn't know what had just happened. They only knew they were alone. Shadow tried to crawl out of the box, her tiny paws slipping on the cardboard. Sunny nuzzled close to her, trembling. The world had suddenly grown big, loud, and terrifying. A semi-truck barreled past on the highway, its horn echoing like thunder. The puppies flinched, retreating deeper into the box. Dust swirled around them. A crow cawed from a nearby post, eyeing the scene below. There were no homes here, no people, no safety, only silence, and a pair of small, frightened lives left behind. Not because they were bad, not because they had done anything wrong, but because someone decided they didn't matter. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Unseen just over the hill, someone was watching. The day grew longer. The highway shimmered in the heat, waves of hot air rising from the asphalt. The box that held the puppies began to sag from the weight of the sun, its corners softening, the base slowly giving way. Inside, Sunny and Shadow shifted restlessly, their fur sticky and damp. Shadow was the braver of the two. She pushed her tiny nose over the edge of the box and gave a squeaky bark, hoping someone might hear. But the only response was the rumble of engines and the whisper of dry grass in the wind. Sunny whimpered and snuggled against his sister, shivering despite the heat. Hunger gnawed at their tiny bellies. They hadn't eaten since the night before, and the ache was becoming unbearable. They sniffed the inside of the box, chewing at the cardboard edges in desperation. The cardboard tasted like dust and regret. Every so often, a car would pass. Fast, loud, indifferent. A few slowed just a little, before speeding away. One driver even glanced in the rear-view mirror. But no one stopped. No one came. As the sun began to dip, the sky painted itself in streaks of orange and pink. A gentle breeze picked up, offering momentary relief. But with it came another danger. A snake slithered from the bushes nearby, curious about the unusual box in its domain. Shadow growled, or at least tried to. Her voice cracked. She stood protectively in front of Sonny, tail stiff, eyes wide with fear. The snake paused, then hissed and slithered away, unimpressed. Still, it was a brush with death that neither puppy understood fully, but both instinctively feared. Rain clouds began to gather on the horizon. Thunder growled softly, like a warning. Soon, the first drops fell, splattering against the cardboard, making dark splotches. The box absorbed the water quickly, sagging more by the minute. Shadow tried to climb out again, this time slipping and tumbling onto the muddy ground with a soft thud. Sonny cried out, scared for his sister. She shook herself and crawled back in, soaked but safe, for now. Lightning flashed in the distance. The highway, once baking hot, now glistened in the rain. The puppies huddled together for warmth, each heartbeat louder than the last in the silence between thunderclaps. They didn't know what was happening, only that the man who once held them, the house that once sheltered them, were gone, and the world had become a cruel, wet, and lonely place. They were too young to understand betrayal, but they understood fear, and they felt it in their bones as night descended like a curtain. But just beyond the ridge, someone else saw the lightning. Someone else heard the thunder. And someone else, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, with eyes full of sorrow, was already moving toward them. Under the shelter of a crumbling overpass just a few hundred feet from the highway, Elias stirred awake. He wasn't startled by the thunder. He had long since become familiar with the angry groans of nature. What caught his attention was a faint sound, soft, barely audible through the rainfall, of something crying. Years of solitude had sharpened his senses. His life, once defined by the rhythm of turning wrenches and engine roars in a bustling mechanic shop, had slowed to a crawl. He'd lost everything, his job, his home, and his wife, one heartbreak after another. But what he hadn't lost was the ability to care. He rose, pulling his worn jacket tighter, and stepped out into the drizzle. His boots, soaked through at the soles, squished with every step. Guided only by the trembling sounds and a flicker of intuition, he climbed the muddy ridge and scanned the roadside. And there, nearly hidden in the tall grass, was the box. It was barely holding together now, its contents soaked and shivering. Elias's breath caught as he knelt beside it. Two tiny pups, soaked, frightened, curled against each other like fallen leaves, looked up at it with eyes wide as the sky. God, he murmured, what kind of person? He reached in slowly, whispering softly, It's okay now. I'm not here to hurt you. His voice, though gruff from years of silence, carried a tenderness that made Shadow inch forward and sniff his fingers. Sonny followed, nudging his nose against Elias's hand. I don't have much, Elias muttered, gently scooping them into his arms. But you're not staying here. Not tonight. He carried them back to the overpass, wrapped them in the dry part of his blanket, and took out the only food he had, half a sandwich someone had given him earlier that day. He tore it into little pieces and fed the puppies bite by bite, watching them chew eagerly, tails wagging faintly for first time. He found a tin can, poured some of his precious bottled water into it, and placed it between them. That night, as the rain beat down above them and thunder rolled like distant drums, Elias sat with the puppies curled on his lap. He didn't sleep. He just sat in silence, his hand resting on their backs, his heart doing something it hadn't done in a long time. Open. You know, he whispered, I used to think the world forgot me. Maybe it did. But I didn't forget how to be human. And in that quiet moment, beneath a highway no one cared about, three souls that the world had abandoned found each other, and a new beginning neither of them had expected. Morning broke slowly, casting a golden hue over the wet earth. The rain had passed, leaving behind a world freshly washed, yet still marked by hardship. Elias rubbed his eyes as the sunlight trickled through cracks in the concrete above him. The puppies stirred beside him, stretching their tiny legs, yawning in perfect synchrony. He smiled, a rare, genuine smile. Morning, little ones, he said softly. Looks like we made it through the storm. He didn't know what he would do next. He had no money, no shelter beyond this broken slab of highway. But the thought of letting them go, of returning them to the chaos that had left them to die, that wasn't something he could stomach. He wrapped them in his blanket and set out walking toward the edge of town, hoping someone, somewhere would listen. Maybe a gas station attendant would help. Or maybe, for once, luck would favor him. As fate would have it, help came sooner than expected. About a mile down the highway, a brightly painted van came rolling by, slowing at the sight of Elias holding the puppies. The van belonged to a local animal rescue group, Paws of Grace, known for searching rural areas for lost or injured animals. Two volunteers, Sarah and Amon, jumped out the moment they saw the pups. "Oh my God!" Sarah gasped, rushing forward. "Are they okay?" "They're better now," Elias said, carefully handing them over. "I found them by the road last night, abandoned." Amon took one of the pups and cradled it. They wouldn't have lasted another day. Sarah looked at Elias. "You saved them. You probably saved their lives." Elias shrugged, his voice low. "They saved mine too, I think." The women loaded the puppies into the van and offered Elias a ride back into town. On the way, they learned his story, how he'd once been a skilled mechanic, how life had dealt him every cruel hand imaginable, how he'd spent the last year surviving in the shadows. When they reached the animal shelter, the puppies were checked and cleaned. They were malnourished but stable. Already, staff were falling in love with them. But it wasn't just the puppies that capture hearts. Sarah wrote a heartfelt post on the shelter's social media page that evening, sharing Elias' story. The homeless man who had nothing, yet gave everything to save two abandoned lives. The response was overwhelming. Within days, donations flooded in. Strangers offered jobs. A local garage owner recognized Elias' name and offered him a position. A kind older woman who ran a boarding house donated a small room, rent-free for 3 months. Elias never asked for any of it. But the universe, so long silent to his prayers, finally spoke back, not with riches or grandeur, but with dignity, purpose, a second chance. The man who had nothing was now someone people were proud to know. And the puppies? They had begun their journey to new homes, but not before leaving their first rescuer a little piece of their hearts. Months had passed since that stormy night. Sunny and Shadow, now fully grown and healthy, had been adopted by two loving families. One lived in the countryside, the other in the suburbs. They visited the shelter often and were something of local celebrities now, not just for surviving, but for the story that brought an entire community together. Elias, too, had transformed. He wasn't rich. He didn't own a house. But he had something he hadn't felt in years, pride. Working at a local garage brought grease back under his fingernails and meaning back to his days. The small rented room was modest, but it had a bed, a mirror, and a door he could lock. Things he once thought he'd never have again. He became known in the neighborhood. People waved. Kids brought their bikes to him for tune-ups. Someone even gifted him a second-hand radio, and he'd sometimes hum along to old country songs while fixing engines. And then, one afternoon, while changing the oil on a silver sedan, the past caught up with him. The car pulled in without fanfare. Elias barely noticed the driver until he stepped out. It was him, the man who had left Sunny and Shadow by the highway. He wore polished shoes, a designer shirt, and a look of faint irritation, clearly unaware of whose hands would service his car. But the moment their eyes met, Elias saw it. That flicker of recognition. The widening pupils, the stiffening jaw. Guilt had a way of clinging to the skin, even after months. For a few seconds, neither man spoke. The air between them grew heavy. Elias straightened. "Nice car," he said coolly, wiping his hands on a rag. "Had a few engine issues?" The man cleared his throat. Yeah, just an oil change." Elias nodded. "Sure, I can handle that." He worked in silence, his hands steady. But inside, memories surged. The image of those pups trembling in the rain, the sound of their cries swallowed by passing trucks. And yet, he felt no rage, no desire to shame or punish, just a deep, solemn understanding of how far they both traveled, and how differently they'd walked that path. When the job was done, the man hesitated before getting in the car, looked about those dogs. Elias raised a hand gently. "They're safe. They're loved. And so am I now." The man nodded, his eyes dropping. I didn't know anyone saw me that day. Elias smiled, not unkindly. The world sees more than we think, and it remembers the good and the bad. As the car drove off, Elias turned toward the open bay. Behind him, Sarah approached with a familiar wagging tail, Shadow, visiting again with her new family. She missed you, Sarah said. Elias bent down, scratching behind Shadow's ears. Yeah, he whispered. I missed you too. And in that moment, with oil on his hands, warmth in his heart, and the world finally right side up, Elias understood something profound. It's not where you come from that defines you. It's who you choose to be when no one's watching. And sometimes, the smallest lives save us in the biggest ways.